Welcome to the Escapism channel. I'm your host Terrelle. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're a subscriber that's checking in, thank you. In today's video, I want to review Gladiator 2, which I had the pleasure of watching at the BFI IMAX in London over this past weekend. I did drop a little short onto YouTube of my experience and my outer theater reaction after watching it. I don't think it reached many of your algorithms, but it is there. And I think in future, when I do watch films at the cinema, I think I will drop a YouTube short of my out of cinema reaction, out of theater reaction, just to give you my initial thoughts ahead of my review. And then some films I may do an out of cinema reaction, and that solely be all I do when I speak about that film. Other films, if I want to go in more depth, then I will do a review as well, which will go in more depth, like I am doing today, because Gladiator 2, which released this past weekend in the UK, it's out in America at the end of this week, surprised me a lot. Now, to give you a quick bit of background, I don't love the original Gladiator film as much as everyone else does. I think it is a classic. I think it's an excellent film. It's just not one film that I would personally put on my favorite films of all time list, although I do consider it to be a very good film and an excellent film. And what I will say about Gladiator 2 is when the trailers released for this film, I didn't necessarily have high expectations. And I didn't necessarily think the film looked anything exceptional, but I thought, okay, this looks good, and we'll see how it goes. And so I went into the cinema with kind of tempered expectations for this film, and I gotta say, Gladiator 2 really surprised me for many reasons, and I'm gonna get into it. But overall, I think Gladiator 2 is magnificent, and it's an epic of historical fiction, the likes that we rarely see nowadays, unfortunately, because these type of films just rarely get made nowadays. And I'd say it's a worthy sequel to the classic film from 2000, and it's actually much better as a whole and as a sequel than I expected it to be. And this is because the film is bolstered by an exceptional performance from its entire cast, and a variety of exhilarating, edge of your seat action set pieces and a narrative that is ripe with political intrigue. Now, at first, the film structurally feels like it will follow a very familiar structure to the first film, even to a fault. And that was something that, as I was watching the film in the opening act, I was enjoying it, but I was also thinking in my head, oh, this almost feels like your typical legacy sequel, like Star Wars The Force Awakens, for example, or Jurassic World, where you're kind of giving us what we liked before, just repackaged. And like I said, I was enjoying it, but I was thinking, oh, that's a shame if they just continue in this direction because it was lining up structurally in a very similar way to that first film. But at a point, towards the second half of the film, the script smartly diverts from that in compelling ways that I found to be gripping. Now, I believe Ridley Scott deserves a lot of praise for his work on this film. The fact that Ridley Scott, an 86-year-old man, was able to shoot a film with the production scale of Gladiator 2 in just 51 days is bonkers, in my opinion, and it's something that is worthy of the Academy's attention come the Oscar season. If he doesn't get nominated for Best Director Oscars, what are we doing here, man? This man is 86 years old, and what he achieves with this film is just tremendous. An example of this is the large scale. So the film opens with a large scale battle, and you see it in the trailer. And Paul Mescal, the lead actor, recently said in an interview that that battle that opens the film was actually scheduled for a 4-week shoot in Morocco. And he said they got in and out in 9 days. And that level of efficiency is crazy. And that speaks to the experience and to the skill of Ridley Scott and, how he is as a director to be able to cut down and be ahead of time, ahead of schedule by almost 3 weeks on a big set piece like what opens this film. I think Ridley Scott is a master of his craft. He puts it on full display here, in this film, and it's really impressive as a result. And one example of that again is a lot of the actors in interviews have spoken about how Ridley had about 11 cameras rolling simultaneously throughout this shoot, and that's how he was able to make this film so quickly because he had cameras at all different angles, cameras hidden in certain spots that the actors weren't even aware of, capturing everything. So he had a lot of coverage every day, and I thought it speaks to his quality as a director in a massive way. And I think without a doubt, the Academy need to recognize him come the end of the year. The entire cast of this film were operating at a really high level, and each character had like a fascinating element to them, which every actor was able to kind of play on and expand upon. And I just thought the cast were exceptional across the board. Paul Mescal had big shoes to fill in the lead role here, and I think he succeeded in delivering a central performance that had different characteristics to what Russell Crowe brought with Maximus in the first film, but he was still able to capture your attention and understanding and your empathy overall for what drives him, his motivations, and his rage. Denzel Washington gives one of the biggest I'm him performances I think I've ever seen. He's simply outstanding in this film. Every aspect of his performance is finely tuned, and only a thespian performer of his caliber could deliver what he did in this role. And he dials it up as the story progresses, and what began as something understated evolves into something stupendous by the end. And I'm certain this performance of his will be up there alongside Training Day as one of my favorite performances from Denzel Washington. And I can't see anyone snatching the Best Supporting Actor nomination from him or Oscar from him come awards season. And yeah, the way that he is Alonzo, if you've ever seen Training Day, the way in which he portrays and brings life to the character of Alonzo and the energy and charisma which makes him such a pleasure to watch on screen as that character in Training Day translates that into his performance in this film to the point where he really feels like an extension of what his work on Training Day was in regards to really breathing life into our character. And like I said, I say the same about Training Day, and I'm saying it here. The character on the page would not be what it is on screen if it was a different actor compared to Denzel Washington. I think Denzel really brought his own sensibilities to this role, which made it stand out and made it that much more entertaining and impactful. He just chews scenery in every scene in this film, and you can tell he's having a lot of fun doing it. Pedro Pascal's character isn't as one note as you may expect in this film, and that gives him a lot of room to portray the character with more emotional dimensions, which inform his motivations. And I found that to be a pleasant surprise because at the start of the film, when you first see his character and what his character's up to, you think you've got a complete 100% read on that character from like start to end, and you think, oh, this is exactly the way it's going to go with this character. And like I said, it tying it into the first film, you think, oh yeah, I've seen this before. I know where this is going to go. But then the film does do something different with his character, which was very refreshing and kind of threw a spanner in the works of what your expectations may be with this film and with what's shown in the trailer. And I got to give a lot of praise to the marketing of this film because they hid a lot of what makes this film surprising and great. And it's because the marketing didn't reveal it all. They didn't show their hand with the marketing, and I really appreciate that because that's a rare thing to come by nowadays, unfortunately. Connie Nielsen has a bigger role to play in this sequel than I expected, and she serves as some important connective tissue to the original film, and I think she excels in some of the film's quieter moments. I thought she was just great in this film. Joseph Quinn and Fred Hechinger, I think is how you pronounce his name. They were scene stealers in this film as a despicable pair of brothers who are emperors of Rome in this movie. I love their characters and I love performances like this. They maximize their screen time with every mannerism and every word spoken, and they were a complete pleasure to watch. And you've got some scenes in this film with them opposite Denzel Washington, and I think you've got the most eccentric performers in the film all on screen. Those moments really shine, and like I said, I revel in these type of performances, and I don't want to be hyperbolic here. So when I say this, I don't mean it in a literal sense. But if you think of Heath Ledger's Joker and how riveting it was to watch him on screen and how much you enjoy seeing that persona and that character on screen in every moment he is featured. I'm not saying these performances are on the level of Heath Ledger's Joker, but in terms of that feeling you get when you see a character that you're just itching to see on screen again, I got it with these two twin emperors. Every moment on screen I loved with these characters, and I thought the performances were just perfect for that type of character and those type of roles, and it enriched the film in a major way. And another aspect I liked about their characters, without going into it in depth, is the foundation of these two emperors are clearly influenced by the story of Romulus and Remus, which, if you know your history about ancient Rome, is quite significant. So I like how the film has shades of real world history and myth and kind of intertwines it with certain characters and what goes on in this film. And like I said, those performances and the rest of the cast performances overall, I thought were just exceptionally great and one of the strongest parts of this film. Politically speaking, there is actually a lot going on in this film, and that's why I said the film is ripe with political intrigue. And I think the opposing political ideals and ideologies that are at play in this story is well handled, and it drives the drama and is also somewhat relatable to modern society and modern politics. And I think within that is a lesson about how we could operate and navigate through politics in the modern society. That is told through this story, but not in a way that is either pandering or in your face. It's kind of subtle. You know, someone could watch this film and not read into that at all. But the type of person that I am, I kind of look outside the box with certain things and certain themes that are in films, and it's definitely there in my opinion, but it's not in your face about it. One big aspect of this film that I thought was really successful as again is the spectacle and the action set pieces, which, like I said, present exhilarating edge of your seat spectacle. I watched this in IMAX. There were certain moments, in fact, every gladiatorial scene, every major action set piece, I literally sat at the edge of my seat, leaning forward, soaking it all up. And the dialogue scenes in this film are so good as well that even in some of the dialogue scenes, I was sat on the edge of my seat. But it really delivers on that aspect, and there was an impressive variety of them, which sets them apart from what happens in the original and doesn't feel like a retread. So with these battles, you have sequences involving monkeys, sharks, naval combat, rhinos. There's a lot going on, and the film doesn't shy away from the blood and injury detail, which is another thing that I appreciate greatly because a lot of films these days sometimes do step back on that. But no, you have a bit of decapitation, you have blood splatter, and a bit of gore, and I appreciate that about this film as well. Another aspect of Gladiator 2 that I think is going to do well come award season is the production design elements, which I thought were all stellar, from the costumes to the sets to the hair and makeup, all excellently done. If you see any of the behind the scenes footage or any of the interviews with the cast or the director, they talk about how they built these larger than life sets, you know, Colosseum built sets and loads of extras and how that kind of brought the actors into this world and really like gave them a lot to work with. And in this era of cinema where there's a lot of green screen and a lot of poor visual effects of backdrops and such and such, I really appreciate the practicality of this film and the practicality in bringing ancient Rome to life for not only these actors to exist within and perform in, which I think brings more out of their performance, but also in terms of the experience watching it enhances it by a great deal. Now, are there any flaws with Gladiator 2? Not really, in my opinion. I actually think this film was excellent. Now, like I said, my relationship with the first film is not a film I've watched a lot. Watched it when I was younger, and then I watched it the day before I watched this sequel. And I think that's a great film, exceptional film. I never expected this film to surpass it, and I think it's very unrealistic to expect this sequel to surpass a film that has the reputation of the first Gladiator film. That being said, I think this sequel is almost as good as it could have possibly have been. And if I'm being completely honest with you, over time, I could easily see myself preferring this sequel over the original, which may sound like blasphemy to those that absolutely adore the original, but I think this sequel is so good that it can almost stand on par with the original, which is extremely high praise. And the only key flaw that's really kind of stood out to me when watching this film, but it's not even that big of a deal to me because I enjoy the film as a whole, is its connective tissue with the first film. So in terms of Paul Mescal's character, he plays the son of Maximus, which is what they've revealed in the trailer and the marketing. And what they do there in terms of explaining that and who he actually is in relation to who you see in the first film, that aspect I think is a little shaky. And I think there's a little bit of convenience there that you might have to just let pass in order to accept this sequel. But I think because this sequel is so good, in my opinion, I can let that go. But I think that is an aspect that is a little shaky. And I think that is the only key flaw of the film that I have, really. Another thing I'd like to say is films like Gladiator 2 speak to the male experience in ways that are rarely spoken about. Now, every man feels anger and rage and even hard done by at some point in life, but it's about what you do with that. Will you succumb to that and use it for negative purposes, or will you use it as fuel for progression, whether that be within yourself or something greater than you? That is at the core of Paul Mescal's character's arc in this film, and I think it was a very good exploration of that theme. And like I said again with some other elements of this film, it's not in your face about it, but if you want to read into that aspect, it's there. And as someone like myself that does like to read into characters and I like to soak up the depth a lot more in those type of thematic qualities, I was really impressed at how the film portrayed that. And I think there's a good lesson in there to be learned by young men that are intelligent enough to see it and to take it in. And I think it could be quite a positive thing. So I think there is a positive message within this film, buried within this gladiatorial epic, historic epic. There's a great message. And I just want to quickly say again at the end, before I end this review, I love these type of films and we don't get enough of them. And I tweeted after watching the film that I would happily trade the majority of comic book films we get nowadays for more sword and sandals epics, more historical epics, fantasy epics like we used to get, because this genre of film is almost as important, equally as important historically to the medium of cinema as the Western. You know, you go back to the even prior to the 50s, but if you look at 1959 and 1960 with Ben-Hur and Spartacus, from then till now, there's been a long history of either historical fiction or historical epics, fantasy epics, you know, where you got like Jason and the Argonauts, Clash of the Titans, Conan the Barbarian. These films have existed all throughout cinema history. And right now, at this period of time, I think this is why I enjoyed this film so much again, is this felt like such a breath of fresh air. A well-made film by a veteran director with actors working exceptionally well, and it's an epic film with historical fiction. It just was such a breath of fresh air. And I want films like this to exist because I grew up throughout the 2000s with the epics. You know, my generation, the films of this ilk from my generation are Gladiator, 300, Troy, Alexander, King Arthur. Now, not all of those films are great films, but I still like the fact that these films were made. And nowadays, if I'm to look at the younger generation now, what films do they have of that ilk besides this one? There isn't many. And I'd love for more to get made. I'd love for a new Clash of the Titans film to get made. You know, give a director a modest budget to create a new Clash of the Titans or make a new film set on another mythology. You know, I'd love to see more myth in films, put Egyptian myth in a film. You know, I'd just love to see more of that. I just want to make that clear. You know, I just want to speak on that because it's something I noticed when I watched this film. You know, one of the reasons why I was loving it so much is it was an aspect of cinema that I really do like and have always liked since I was younger. It's a historic part of cinema, but it's a part of cinema that we've seemed to have lost a bit as the cinematic craze of superhero films have kind of taken over blockbuster cinema. So that's just something I wanted to make a statement on. But anyway, Gladiator 2, if you're on the fence, go watch it. Go watch it on the biggest screen possible. Temper your expectations, especially if you do love the original film to a really high standard. Temper your expectations, but definitely go see it on a big screen. It's deserving of your time and money, and I think you will enjoy it. I loved it. One of my favorite films of the year. I didn't expect that to be the case, but that is my thoughts on Gladiator 2. Thank you for watching this video if you've watched this far. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. If you're new here and you enjoyed the video, hit the subscribe button and make sure to drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on Gladiator 1 and Gladiator 2 if you've seen it or if you're going to see it. Let me know what your expectations are, and I'll speak to you guys in the next video.